Hello, my name is Laura, and this is the first episode of my knitting podcast. I am coming to you from the floor of my art room because this was the most aesthetically pleasing corner I could find in my house for now. Even though I've lived here for several months, decorating has not been a priority of mine. So hopefully maybe one day you'll pop into one of these podcasts and it's just going to be completely different and beautiful and have a bunch of knitting related things behind me. But for now, I think this will do. So basically what I wanted to talk about in this first podcast is catch you up on my knitting journey so far and kind of the 3 things that I've knitted up to this point that I don't have to show you today. Show you what I've completed so far this year, and talk about my works in progress, and then some yarn that I got for my upcoming projects. All right, so I started knitting about 2 years ago, and it was because I wanted to make a Weasley sweater for my sister for Christmas. And this was completely out of the blue. I don't know why, I just was like, she's a Hufflepuff. She needs a Hufflepuff Weasley sweater. So I looked at pictures of different patterns that were available, and it was basically between knitting and crocheting. And at the time I didn't really know what the difference was, but I just thought that I liked the look of knitting better, and I thought it was more accurate to the sweaters that they made for the films. And so I was like, knitting it is. Let's learn how to knit. Let's make her a Weasley sweater. And so I did. It was honestly really beautiful. I just went to Hobby Lobby and I picked out the yarn based on color only, so I didn't really think about the weight of the yarn at the time. And it was this beautiful yellow tweed kind of mix. I don't remember what the name of it was, and it doesn't matter anyway because Hobby Lobby does this beautiful thing where they basically just discontinue their yarns after a certain period of time. I don't know what that period of time is, but it's been too short for me, and I'll tell you about that in just a minute. But anyway, I made the sweater, and I'm pretty proud of how it turned out. And oh, by the way, I wanted it to be a Weasley sweater, and if you're not familiar with the Harry Potter films, the Weasleys have like a letter, like their initial on the sweater, and I was gonna use duplicate stitch to make the E for Emily and make that, to put that on her sweater. And I showed it to my mom before I'd put the letter on, and she was like, don't put the letter, it's beautiful, don't ruin it, it's just beautiful. And so I didn't, I just left it alone, and she actually wears it. So that's really exciting to have somebody wear something that I made. And yeah, so it was a really good first knitting experience. And after that, I had a less good experience where I tried to make a sweater vest, and I just looked up a free tutorial on YouTube. I can't remember what the video was, but I was not happy with how it turned out for a couple of reasons, and one of them was the yarn thing I just talked about. I again went to Hobby Lobby and just picked out some black yarn because I wanted a black sweater vest, and I think it was acrylic. It said it had some type of silk in it, but I don't believe that. And it was a bottom-up construction sweater, and I got to about here and ran out of yarn. So I was like, that's fine, I'll just go to Hobby Lobby and get some more. You can't get more because they just stopped making it. And so I picked out what I thought was a really close, similar color, and it was not. It was much lighter than the color that I had started with. So I finished the sweater anyway. So from here up, there's a line where it gets lighter. And then also for the bind off on the ribbing, it's just super loose and it flares out because I didn't know to go down in needle size or to do a different type of bind off. So I'm not really pleased with how that turned out. I was just gonna either unravel it or just let it sit in my drawer and be sad. But my best friend actually said she would wear it. So I just gave it to her, and hopefully she does get some use out of it. And then that's been it up until, that was all I did for my first year of knitting. And then a few months ago, right before Christmas, I was like, okay, my other sister, she gets a sweater this year. So I knitted the pattern, I believe it was called the Seamless Mock Neck Sweater by Well Loved Knits. and I loved this sweater and knitting it. It was my first time doing a raglan, or really doing a top-down sweater, and I really enjoyed that. And this is the yarn that I used. Again, I just went to Hobby Lobby and got yarn. I think this had some wool in it, but it is mostly acrylic. And it was just a really pleasant, well, kind of pleasant knitting experience. I really enjoyed the pattern itself, but I'm not sure if it's because the yarn is so chunky or if it's like a combination of like the chunky yarn. I'm a tight knitter and circular needles, but my hands just hurt really badly while I was working on this, and so I couldn't work on it for more than like 30 minutes at a time. I'm just gonna unravel this, but still it was fun and I liked the result. The only thing that I wish I would have known about or changed is German short rows, or to do some type of short rows on it, because the neck does sit super tall and I was not super comfortable when I tried it on, but I didn't know any better. Like, I didn't know how to fix it or what to do, so I just gave it to her and hopefully she wears it. But if I were to make it again, I would try to incorporate some type of short row into it so that the front doesn't sit so high. But anyway, those are like the 3 things that I've knitted up to this point that I don't have to show you. And since then, right around the time when I started making my little sister's sweater, I got really into knitting podcasts. Just every time, because it's hard for me to watch TV and actually enjoy it while I'm knitting, because I really do have to look at what I'm doing, as opposed to more experienced knitters who can just sit here and talk to you. So what I enjoyed doing was just listening to the knitting podcasts, and oh my gosh, like, I have learned so much in such a short period of time that it's crazy, and I'm loving it. So anyway, that's why I'm here, because I just, wanted to throw in my 2 cents, and yeah, it's just been so good. But let's get into this year and what I have to show you as far as finished objects go. So finished object number 1 is this. This is a Wednesday inspired sweater vest. So it's inspired by the Netflix TV show called Wednesday, and I think she wears this in episode 8. And whenever I first saw that episode, I went to wornontv.com or something, because I wanted to buy it. I was like, oh my gosh, that's such a cute sweater vest. Like, I want one. And it's no longer available. I think it was manufactured by Zara, and it was just no longer available. So I was like, you know what, that's fine, because I've knit 3 things in my life. I know how to knit, so I did. I just made my own version of it. And I actually posted the tutorial on how I made this on my other YouTube channel. Editing Laura here. At the time I was filming this, I thought I wanted to put my knitting podcasts on a separate channel, but I ultimately decided to put them on here. So please ignore anything I say about a separate channel. Thanks. It's just called Laura Rochelle, and that channel does like a lot of things, arts and crafts, and the other sweater I'm going to show you today is also on that channel. But if you are interested in that tutorial, I'll go ahead and link my other channel in the description. But to give you a little rundown of how I made it, this is constructed from the bottom up, and I started at the checkered portion, and then I just worked it 1 column at a time, and then I seamed all of the columns together, and then picked up stitches for all of the ribbing. Now, I did it this way for a couple of reasons, but I'll be honest, the reason that was most obvious to me at the time is that I had never done color work or intarsia, and so I wasn't really ready to experiment with that at the same time that I was designing something. And so I just knitted like a square, tied in the new color, cut the old color, and then just kept knitting. So basically, like, each square had like 3 or 4 ends that were associated with it. And yeah, and so then I seamed everything together at the end. And so that was fine. It was a process, but it was fine. And then the other reason is, especially when I got to like the part around like the back neckline and the front neckline, I knew I would have to probably redo that a few times just because I was learning and I wasn't sure what kind of look I was going for or how to get it as close as possible to the sweater she wore in the TV show. So part of like an advantage of doing one column at a time is that whenever I would have to rip this back, I would only have to rip back one column instead of two. So that was pleasant. And anyway, so that was my Wednesday sweater vest, and I'm kind of happy with how it turned out, like compared to the TV show, because I think it looks pretty accurate, like if I'm allowed to say that. I will say I also used just Hobby Lobby yarn for this. It's called Yarn Bee Soft Stitch in colors black and white, and it's just 100% acrylic. I picked that out just because I wanted to get started really quickly, and it was a yarn that I'm familiar with, and I'll talk about why in just a minute. So yeah, that is one thing that in hindsight I wish I would have done differently, because this is the one thing I've made so far for me that's actually wearable, but at the same time it's not that wearable because I don't think acrylic is it for me. I think it definitely has its place as far as cost effectiveness goes, but I do think that, and I'm just spitballing here, that some type of DK weight and then also maybe like a mohair held together would have made this so beautiful and a little more wearable for my aesthetic or my preference and what I'd be going for, because this is super chunky and very heavy, and I think that that's the one thing that would have made the sweater a little more accurate to the film or to the TV show, because hers has a lot of drape and it's just really pretty. So, but I think for my first time designing a sweater, yeah, I don't know, I think it turned out okay, and I think the yarn was a good choice for me. So, speaking of yarn, as I just talked about, colorwork scared me at the time, and Tarsha scared me at the time, and so I just cut yarn all over the place. Each new square, new yarn, seaming, new yarn. So, if I had a fear of weaving in ends before finishing this sweater, I don't anymore. I'm fearless, because let me tell you, I hope you can see this, but each little bump you see is an end that had to be woven in. So let me count. Let's see. 1, 2. Yeah, okay. So each end, I see in each square at least 2 ends that I wove in. So 1632. Let's talk like 100 ends probably that went into this sweater, because then also I had to seam it and the ribbing. It was a whole thing. Anyway, I'm a weaving expert at this point, probably not, but I feel like it, and I have no fear. Weaving in all these ends probably took 4 to 6 hours. So that's fine. But anyway, that is my Wednesday sweater vest. And like I said, if you were actually curious about how to make that, I would go check out my other YouTube channel, because I've got the full tutorial. I kind of give like a video format of the pattern. I don't give specific sizes, but I kind of give a reference as to, I guess, like how you could size it up and down for you. Because basically what I said to do was choose your yarn and then pick your needles and then make a, is this a 5-inch square? Yeah, make a 5-inch by 5-inch square, or at least that's what I did. Oh, I remember now. Okay, so choose the overall length that you want for the checkered portion, divide that by 4, and so for me, I wanted a 20-inch checkered portion. I divided that by 4, which was 5-inch squares, and then you just make, you know, the correct number of squares, which is super easy to follow. And so if you want an overall length to be 40 inches, then you just divide that by 4 and you'll have 10-inch squares. So that would be too much, but I tried to pick an even number. That it's too much. Anyway, so the yarn would be the one thing I would change, though. I'll tell you guys that. I'm not going to put anything on the other video about that, but I would change the yarn probably to give it more drape. And then the last thing I wish I would have done differently would be for the bottom ribbing. I think it's a little bit too tight. So I went down a couple of needle sizes to make this ribbing, and I think that's like the one thing that would have been more accurate to the film is if I would have just kept with my 5mm needles that I was using, just so it would just kind of keep laying flat and it wouldn't kind of cinch in right there. So that means words. So if you are knitting this in the round, I would say pick your 5mm needles or whatever it is you're using, start at the bottom with the ribbing and just go up, split at the sleeves, and you're golden. I think that's everything I have to say about that. Sorry, that's a lot. All right, and then the next finished object that I have for this year is another Weasley sweater. So, as I said, this is the pattern that I followed for my sister's sweater. Let me show you real quick. So this is the pattern that I followed to make my sister's sweater a couple Christmases ago, and I actually wanted to make one for me. And the yarn that I used for this is, again, Hobby Lobby brand Yarn Bee Soft Stitch, and this is the color Olive. Now, I actually picked out this yarn well before I started the Wednesday sweater because my other sister went to Universal and I had her pick up a Weasley sweater for me because I just wanted one. I was super excited about it. I didn't want to actually make it. I just wanted one. And she brought it back and handed it to me, and I could have cried because it was so itchy and just horrible to touch that I was really sad because I spent $80 on that, but it's fine. So that's why I picked out this yarn. It was just completely out of spite. I wanted it to be super soft, and that ended up being another acrylic. Again, in hindsight, I don't know if acrylic is it. Like, I definitely think like some type of tweed with a little bit of wool mixed in would have been great. But overall, I accomplished what I was going for, which was to make something soft. And yeah, so I think style-wise, it turned out pretty okay. I didn't gauge swatch because I don't know why. I really don't know why. But because I knew that this worsted weight yarn was lighter than the recommended Aran weight yarn, I went ahead and I was just like, I know how to fix this. So I knitted the size extra large and then just made the length about how I wanted, which ended up being a size medium. And it kind of worked a little bit. It's a little bit too baggy on me for what I was going for. It fits my husband pretty well, but for me, it's just a little bit too oversized. And that's fine. But anyway, that's what I did. I learned my lesson. From here on out, I am gauge swatching. So yeah. And this was also my first time knitting in Tarsha, and I think it turned out pretty okay. I didn't want to do duplicate stitch because I did attempt it on my sister's Weasley sweater, and I just found it to be really like a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And so I wanted to get ahead of that and do in Tarsha for this. And it was a pretty fun experience. I didn't realize how many different bobbins I would have to have going at the same time. So that was neat. But also I got a little bit of experience in chart making because as far as I could tell, the pattern, the pattern is a free pattern by Alison Hansel, and I think it's just called the Weasley sweater. I will link it or maybe like attach the other video that I made for this sweater. And it's a free pattern, by the way, super, super awesome. But on to that point, I believe the pattern only came with the letter H. So I had to make my own letter F because I wanted to make Fred's sweater, and so I got some experience doing chart making, and I think I did an okay job. I don't think it's incredibly accurate to the film sweater, but I think it's close enough for what it was. But one issue that came with that is because the sweater is bottom up, I started the letter too high and ended up having to sacrifice a couple inches of length in the neckline here, in the shoulder, and so the sweater does sit a little higher than I would like it to, which takes away a little bit of the coziness, but it's not that bad. But back to the pattern for just a second. So I found this pattern, 2 years ago when I made my sister's, and I remember reading somewhere that Alison worked with the original costume designer who made the sweaters for the film. And so the pattern is like insanely accurate. I'm gonna see if I can put like a side by side, but the little like stockinette curl of the neckline, stockinette curl of the bottom, and then 2x2 ribbing of the cuff. Like, believe it or not, it was really, I found a lot of Weasley sweaters that just didn't have all of these details. And so I was really, really excited when I found this one, and it's just insanely accurate. And so to hear that she actually worked with the costume designer on that was just really cool. And I think it made it like a little bit more special. So, but yeah, I think that's all I have to say about my Weasley sweater. I am proud of it. It didn't turn out exactly how I would want it to. Like, I'd want it to be a little bit smaller, and I would want it to actually be in a tweed. So maybe, just maybe, I'm gonna knit another one eventually so that I finally have my Weasley sweater that I want. But for now, I think it's perfect and it's exactly what I need. So there is that one. All right, so those are the 2 finished objects that I have completed so far this year, and they're both pretty costumey, I would say. I don't actually get any wear out of them outside of the house, and so I think it was fine. I think the acrylic choice was fine for that because they are costumey, and it's really hard to justify spending more money on like natural materials on something that I might not actually get any wear out of. So I think those are fine for what they are. But that being said, I am so excited to actually make my first what I consider big girl sweater, and that would be my Stockholm sweater by PetiteKnit. Let me see if you can see this. So this pattern, I feel like I picked it out just based on, I actually don't know why I picked this pattern. I think I just saw the picture and I was like, wow, I love that sweater. This looks nothing like any of her pictures, so I don't know how I arrived at this point, but well, actually I do. So the yarn I'm using is another Hobby Lobby brand yarn called, let's see, Authentic Hand Dyed in the colorway Stonework. Now, this is 100% superwash merino wool, and it was a birthday gift from my mom, and so that's why I'm using it. I think it is, yeah, Hobby Lobby puts like different sizes on their yarn, and so they consider this to be a lace weight yarn, and so I am holding it double to make this sweater, and it's really pleasant so far. Like, this is pretty soft. I'll be honest, it's not as soft as the acrylic, but it's pretty soft for what it is, and I like knowing that it's not plastic and it is a wool, even though I'm not so sure what superwash means. From what I understand, it just means that it can go in the washing machine, but I think it's like some type of chemical that might not be fantastic, environmentally speaking. So if you know more about this and would just love to share what you know, I would love to hear about it because I want to learn more and hopefully one day just be able to use 100% like natural materials or just like really environmentally conscious materials, because I think that's where I want to head in my knitting journey. But for now, I think it works. I think it's pretty, it's soft, and I'm enjoying it so far. Now, when I have worked with the variegated yarn before, but that was such a completely different experience from this, and I think holding it double has a little bit to do with it. But also, I think the hand-dyed component to it makes it less reliable, and so I think you would be able to see it. There's a line directly down the middle of the abdomen where I switched to new skeins or hanks. I don't know what it's called yet. And because, you know, it's like darker up top, and then I guess the next ones that I used were a little bit lighter. And when I saw that happened, it kind of took some of the magic of the sweater away from me. And so I'm really upset about that. But I think I'm going to try to do some research and see if there's a way to fade the top portion of the yarn, like kind of take the coloring away from that. So if you know anything about that too, please let me know, because I'm sure this is a common problem of just beginner knitters not knowing that hand-dyed yarns can just have pretty extreme color variation in it. So I think I'm going to try to do something with that. But the one happy thing, or the one thing that I'm really pleased about with this yarn, is this bottom ribbing. I love the spiral that it created. I don't know why. That was just kind of exciting. I don't know. I just kind of like that. And yeah, the sweater is pretty soft compared to the yarn. I would say the yarn in the, like, just by itself is softer than what it is when it's knitted into the sweater, but it's not horrible, I wouldn't say. Like, it definitely is as soft as it looks, which means I don't think it looks very soft, and it's not, but it also doesn't look super scratchy, and it's not. And, oh, one thing that I would say about something that's probably going to be a trend on this podcast is if you are really into soft yarns and knowing what is really soft and what's not scratchy at all, I'm going to let you know, because my sensitivity to just scratchy things, like, well, my tolerance is really low, and not from an allergic standpoint, not like I don't have reactions to the natural fibers or anything. I'm just really picky, and I don't see the point in making something that looks so beautiful but is completely unwearable because of how uncomfortable it is. Like, I just don't see the point in that. So if something's soft, if something's scratchy, I will let you know. And I'll be honest, because like I said, what's the point of spending like tens of hours making something that isn't as pleasant as it looks? So that's my thoughts on that. A couple of cool things about this pattern is this is my first time doing German short rows, and I thought it was going to be a lot scarier than what it actually ended up being. It was completely fine. That's how the shoulders are shaped here, and yeah, it's a little bumpy, but I'm hoping that over time the bumps will settle out, and maybe after blocking it will, hopefully. But for my first time doing German short rows, I don't think it's that horrible. And yeah, one other thing about this pattern is PetiteKnit said this is a 4 out of 5 difficulty, and maybe it's because I've knit a couple of other sweaters before this, but I actually don't think it's that hard. I don't know, I read like the components of what made it that level of difficulty, and I was like, this is gonna be crazy. This is gonna be the craziest thing I've ever seen in my entire life, but it's not that so far. Like, really it is German short rows, and then I did the optional Italian bind off, which is a whole other thing in itself. Like, this is beautiful. I'm never going back to a regular bind off ever. And so far that's been it. Those have been like the two crazy things that I've seen in this, and maybe I just haven't gotten, like, I haven't done the sleeves yet, so maybe those get a little crazy in like 4 out of 5 difficulty, or maybe I just completely don't understand what she means by that. But I saw the pattern, I thought it was pretty, so I was like, I'm gonna make one of those, and I am. And I'm really enjoying it so far. One thing about the ribbing is that it's just so slow. I don't know if anybody else experiences this, but like the body just went so fast. I tore through the German short rows. I was like, this is new, this is exciting. And then I got to the ribbing, and I think it took me 2 days to knit this collar because, you know, it is folded double. I just have it kind of pinned down for now. I haven't actually sewn it down. And that's a long time, I think, to spend on a collar or on a, yeah. Anyway, ribbing's just really slow. I feel like it was the needle size. I'm not so sure, but anyway, it's fine. And yeah, I think that's everything I have to say about my Stockholm sweater for now. I really am enjoying it so far, and if the end result is as nice as I think it's gonna be, I think I'm definitely gonna make another one of these this year in a non-hand-dyed yarn, just because I want it to be a solid color, and I think that that would really unlock and reveal the beauty in the not simplicity, but the beauty of the pattern itself. So if I really love the fit of this, I think I'm definitely gonna make another one this year, just in a solid color. So that is my Stockholm sweater by PetiteKnit. I've actually, one more thing. This is 2 weeks of work. I'm not a fast knitter by any means, but like, I'm kind of like proud of how much I've gotten done in just 2 weeks. Like, this is crazy. So I'm really hoping that I will have this completely done and then have another sweater like at like a really good like 1/3 or halfway point for the next podcast. So hopefully you'll get to see that. And that is actually all I have as far as works in progress go. And let's talk about that for a second. So I am a monogamous knitter as of right now. And for me, that's actually not so much a knitting preference as it is a financial choice. And as I am sure we are all aware of by now, knitting is not cheap. And especially since I'm wanting to get into more natural fibers. Like for example, this is a Hobby Lobby brand. It's superwash merino wool, but this was still $16 for one of these. And that's kind of a lot. Is it a lot? I don't know. But I've needed 6 of these so far is what I'm predicting to make the entire sweater. And so that really adds up. And so for right now, I am trying to just acquire yarn as I'm about to cast it on because, yeah, I don't know. I think knitting things one at a time right now is what's going to be the best choice for me financially so that I don't get too ahead of myself and get too excited, but then don't actually have time to do all these projects all at once. And so also I think that just knitting something one at a time is going to really help me enjoy and appreciate what it is that I'm working on, because I know I'm not going to move on to the next thing until I finish this. And then who I am as a knitter and just as a crafter in general is I'm pretty slow at the things that I do, but that's because I'm pretty meticulous and try to do a good job on those things. Like for example, the Italian bind off on this probably took me 3 hours, and that's a long time for a bind off, I think. And so, but at the same time, it makes me just want to do a good job and appreciate what it is that I'm working on. And yeah, and then maybe eventually, whenever I get faster at knitting and maybe have some more funding that I can put into this, it'll be fun to carry like 2 or 3 projects at a time and work on those simultaneously. But for now, I think just being a monogamous knitter is just serving its purpose and helping me learn at a really good pace. And like I said, appreciate what it is that I'm working on. So yeah. But that being said, I went to a yarn store in Nashville and I picked up my yarn for the next project I'm going to be working on. And so I have these, and hopefully this will turn into sweater number 21 by My Favourite Things Knitwear. Before I talk about the yarn, I really wanted to make a sweater with holes in it for a reason that I'll tell you in just a minute. And I looked around for a couple days and I found like a couple things that kind of fit what I was looking for, but not really. I'd have to make a lot of modifications and I just couldn't find anything, because also I've never made a holey and lace sweater before, so I wasn't really sure kind of what details or parameters to put into Ravelry to search. But Tiffany from Typical Bliss just popped on to her podcast wearing sweater number 21, and I thought I had watched every single one of her podcasts, but I guess not, because I didn't know she was making this. And so when she just popped on with a finished sweater, I was like, this is gorgeous. This is exactly what I'm looking for. And so yeah, so sweater number 21 is it for me. And this is half of the recommended yarn. This is Isager Eco Soft in the color E6S, and this yarn is 56% alpaca and 44% organic cotton, and it's pretty soft. It's not what I was expecting, I'll be honest. I looked at a lot of pictures online and I was like, oh, this is gonna be the softest thing I've ever touched in my entire life. It's alpaca, but maybe it's because I think it's like a blown yarn, but it's not incredibly soft, but it's not like it's not itchy. Like I wouldn't say this is an itchy yarn. It just kind of is, you know? And I think I'll be able to tell better once I make a swatch, and especially once I start knitting the sweater, so I'll definitely let you know how soft it ends up being. And the yarn store that I went to did not have the other half of the recommended yarn, which I think is Trio by the same brand, but I picked up this yarn called Queensland Collection United, which is 55% lamb's wool and 45% cotton. Now, the trio recommended yarn is cotton, linen, and bamboo. And so this is only cotton. Like this only has the cotton component of that. So I think it might end up making the sweater a little bit warmer than I wanted it to be. But hopefully that'll be fine. Like it's still a long sleeve sweater, so it's going to be warm anyway. But hopefully it'll end up being fine. And maybe that's just my lack of knowledge showing. But I'm excited. Like I said, I'll be able to tell a little bit better once I make a swatch and actually get started on the sweater. And I hope it works out because this is non-refundable. So, fingers crossed. I'm hoping for the best. It'll be fine. But all that being said, the reason that I wanted a holey sweater is because I'm going on a trip this year, and the time of year that we're going is kind of that really weird in between. It's like early fall, and so it's like, is it going to be cold? Is it going to be warm? No one knows. So I wanted to make a sweater to bring, but also had the option of it being like a little bit cooler. So that's why I thought the holes would be good ventilation. But let me tell you where we're going. We're going to Paris. I have never been out of the country, and so I am just beside myself with excitement about this. This is somewhere I've wanted to go for such a long time, and my husband and I've just got married like less than a year ago, and so this will be our first like international trip together. Hopefully there's so many more, but this will be our first big one. And so he was so kind and let me pick the first location, and I was like, it's Paris, we have to go to Paris right now. And I might be hyping it up in my mind, and it might be like kind of gross and smell like cigarettes when I go, but it'll be fine. But anyway, I'm still really excited, and so I want to make several sweaters that I'm going to wear and bring and just hopefully be able to like look a little Parisian and just like I fit in. I have no idea. I think I'm gonna do an episode, or I think I'm gonna do a video where I talk about all of my knitting plans for this year, and 99% of those plans are gonna be centered around this trip to Paris, which might be a little crazy. I mean, who does that? Who makes an entire year's worth of knitting around one vacation? Me, because I'm so excited. And I love knitting with a purpose, you know? It's like, you know, you see a cool sweater and you're like, oh, I'd love that. But you also see a cool sweater and you're like, I would love that on me in Paris, which I think just makes a world of difference. It makes me feel more motivated too. So I think I'm going to make a little knitting plans video here soon and talk about that. But anyway, so first knitting plan for Paris is sweater number 21 by My Favourite Things Knitwear. And that's all I have as far as acquisitions go. Those are all my works in progress. And yeah, one thing I will say is as I mentioned, I'm pretty early on into my like official knitting journey, I would call it, because even though I've made things for about 2 years now, I would say that my Stockholm sweater is my first like knitting pattern. And so that being said, I don't really have a yarn stash. I mean, these 3 yarns, what I'm working with now and what I'm about to make with sweater number 21, like this is it. This is my yarn stash, and which is like kind of cool because I know some knitters struggle with just collecting yarn and then not being able to use it. So I think one kind of, I don't know, conscious effort that I'm going to try to make this year is only get yarn when I am about to cast on the project. And so I bought this yarn because I was on the sleeves for my Stockholm sweater. And so as soon as I get really close to finishing that, I'm going to cast on sweater number 21. And then probably when I hit the sleeves on this, I'm going to get the yarn for my next project. And I think that'll help me be very conscious of what it is that I'm working on and conscious financially of what I am bringing into my collection, and just making sure that I'm able to use everything and really appreciate it. And also I think that'll help me be very selective of the materials that I'm choosing and making sure I do the research that that is the material I want my sweater to be in. I didn't do a great job of that with the Stockholm sweater because I don't know if I mentioned it, but most of the yarn was a gift from my mom. And so I just wanted to go ahead and use that since I had it. But the next version and any other sweater I make from here on out, I'm going to be very selective and do a lot of research on what yarn I want to use and just make sure that that is the best choice for me. So, but yeah, I think that is everything I have for this first podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I hope to make these probably about once a month and update you on just what I've made so far. I'm not an incredibly fast knitter, so there might not be an overwhelming amount of progress to show you, but hopefully that means I'll be able to go into a little bit of detail and really hit the nitty-gritty on, is this thing soft? What do I think about lace? How do you fade yarn? I don't know. Hopefully it'll help me go into a little more detail and share all of my project notes with you guys. But yeah, I think that's everything I have. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm really excited to see you in the next one. Thank you, and I hope you have a beautiful day.